Welcome to our latest webinar. This is Robert Sagers, the Customer Success Manager here at Sierra Interactive. Today, I am joined by Ryan White, the Sales and Business Development Manager at Sierra, and our special guest, Jonathan Hawkins, who is both the founder and CEO at the Hashtag Agent. Today, we have a really awesome webinar with a lot of great content. We're going to be talking about storytelling. We're going to be talking about how you can cut the bland from your brand. And by the way, that rhyme is not Jonathan's, it is mine. So as silly as it is, don't blame him. He's the expert on this issue, and we're going to be talking to him about how it is that you can tell a good story. No matter how bogged down you are, if you're just now getting into real estate, if you're just trying to find your way, you've got all kinds of ways that you can craft and tell a proper narrative. And those narratives and those stories sell. So with that, I just want to introduce you a little bit, Jonathan, or in fact, let you introduce yourself. I know that you have an interesting story, and I would love for you to tell our listeners, our watchers, a little bit more about yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you first off for inviting me here. Super grateful to be able to share my story and then also help others share theirs. I was a former Army intelligence officer. I was actually the youngest Army intelligence officer, and that doesn't mean anything because of the age. What it means is that I was able to learn from a young age how the brain works, how marketing works, how people react to specific messages, and how we can utilize that in multiple industries. I took that and I was getting a degree at UCLA for Arabic and Islamic studies to be trained to be an interrogator at Guantanamo Bay. And I wound up in real estate. And the way that I wound up in there is because I wasn't sure if I was going to stick in the military or if I was going to do something else. So I did a few internships, landed in real estate, and never left. I opened up my own brokerage. After 8 months, I was ranked in the top 1% of agents. And the way that I got there was doing things a little bit differently. And what we want to talk about is, telling your story. But I think it's very imperative and important to talk about the reasons why you want to tell story. I can come in here and give you the 4 portions of storytelling, but if you don't understand why they're so beneficial, then you're probably not going to implement these things into your business. So do you mind if I cover the reasons why?
Let's do that. I'd actually love for you to start with what's a story.
Okay. Well, a story is exactly that. It's something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's at its heart, it's something that allows somebody else to envision themselves as a part of it. For instance, if I'm telling you something and I'm getting you to use your senses, I'm getting you to think about things, that is a story. A story does not have to start and end with in the beginning and the end, okay? It's not like you don't have to think of this in terms of writing a book. You have to think of it in terms of how can I get somebody to put themselves in my scenario.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's dive into the why. Like, why a good story? Why a story with marketing? Why does a real estate agent, a real estate professional, or someone who's outside of the real estate profession, I mean, it certainly doesn't, good story isn't going to only apply, certainly, in that profession, but why does this matter? What's the why behind a good story?
The reason that you want to tell stories, especially through social and marketing, is based off of the brain. And it's based off of the fact that when you only tell facts, okay, when you put out pieces of information that are fact-based, I just sold X house for X price, those are facts. At that point, the brain is only using 2 portions of the brain, and those 2 portions are based off of interpreting language. How do I understand what they're saying? That's all a fact does for you. It uses 2 portions of the brain to interpret the meaning of that. But what it does not do, and what a story does, is a story will allow the brain to use 5 portions, and those portions allow somebody to envision themselves a part of it. And the reason why it's so important, I'll make it very basic for you, is it's the exact same reason. It's called mirror neurons. It's the exact same reason when somebody yawns, another person is more likely to look at that person and yawn, because the brain is trying to fit themselves as a part of what they see. So when we're storytelling, the brain is actually allowing that person to envision themselves a part of that story. So that is the reason why it's so important, is because we want people to take action, right? Ultimately, we want to generate more leads. We want to close more business. But in order to get somebody to take action, we have to get into the subconscious of the brain, because the subconscious is what gets somebody to do something. So rather than coming out and telling lots of facts, storytelling is going to allow somebody to take action.
So why would it, do you think one is easier than the other, telling facts versus telling a story?
Yeah, I definitely think telling facts are the easiest thing to do, because the same reason why facts don't work for others are the same reasons why you do them so well, because you actually don't think about them. You just write. You write a fact. You tell something. You put a statement down. You're not actually having to do a little bit more work to tell this story. So yeah, it's definitely more easy to tell a fact. But if you're doing everything, that's easy. And if you're doing everything because everybody's doing it, then it just goes back to the fact that things are not working for you.
Yeah. And the thing is, anybody can communicate facts, right? And therefore you can just be a bot. You can be anything. You can be a search engine and tell facts. But to tell a story is something that takes you, right? And your investment, your brain, your involvement, and frankly, your experiences and your skills and your expertise.
Exactly. And that's why a lot of speakers that only use statistics, those are great statistics, but it doesn't allow somebody to understand, what does this statistic mean?
Right.
If you're an agent and you're selling houses all over the price ranges in X amount of days, those are great, but you're not going to get somebody to actually get somebody to work with you.
Right. And when they're abstract, yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, so the framework that we're going to be talking about today is basically trying to take these facts and find out what's beneath them, what got them to become facts. And is that how this works? Like we're going to try to kind of weave this narrative of how we're successful, why we're successful, who's involved, and tell that story effectively through these channels?
So what we want to do is we want to break down the fundamentals of storytelling, because I believe that there's 4 portions of a story. And if you understand what the 4 fundamentals of storytelling are, then you can apply it to any of the content that you're putting out. We always recommend that you should be putting out content that falls into 4 pillars. A lot of people talk about 2, but I think it's important to talk about 4. That's personal, that's community, that's brand, and that is business, in this case, real estate. So when we're putting out great content, I think most people understand what good content looks like, as far as visually, or as far as what they think a lot of people want. But it's not necessarily the content that they're putting out is bad. It goes back to, again, these 4 fundamentals of storytelling. And if you can incorporate these 4 fundamentals into those captions, into the actual verbiage that you're using, then you can get somebody to do whatever it is that you want them to do.
Cool. So I would love to dive in. You talked about the 4 components of a good story, or storytelling, the personal, community, brand, and business, and weaving all 4 of those components into your marketing. I would love for you to just dial down a little bit deeper into what each of those 4 components are.
Okay, so great. So those 4 things that I talked about, those are just the 4 pieces, or the 4 kind of higher level categories, if you will, of where your content should be placed. And the reason that you want to place stories in those 4 categories is because your goal is to get somebody to envision themselves in one of the 4. Not everybody is going to fall into the business category right away. Not everybody is going to relate with you on the personal aspect. So if you're putting out content that falls into these 4, then when we talk about storytelling right now, you're allowed to essentially weave them into one of the others. So the four fundamentals that we talk about for storytelling are relevance, they are structure, their simplicity, and their authenticity. So that first one is relevance, right? And to break it down at its simplest, relevance is relatable. How relatable am I to somebody else? How is somebody going to see me when I'm in front of the camera, right? The second is going back into the structure and going into a story has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. But no story gives you everything in 1 second. So if I'm out there and I'm doing a post, right, about a house that I just sold, and I do a just sold post, and then I move on, what I've tried to do is I've just tried to tell an entire story of how I sold this house in one post. That is the reason why it does not resonate with anybody. It's the same reason why nobody is going to call you and say, I saw that you just sold 123 Main Street and you did it in 1 day. Let me work with you. That doesn't happen, okay? Because the third reason goes back into, is simplicity. And that goes back into, I think a lot of people overthink storytelling, which is actually a good thing, because if you realize that a story is simple, and you realize that you don't have to get elaborate, you don't have to have the best editing out there, you don't have to have videographers following you 24/7, you don't have to have the best visual graphics. It has to be simple. And the reason that you want it to be simple is because of the fourth reason, or the fourth fundamental of storytelling, that's authenticity. How is somebody going to see themselves a part of this? They're not going to see it if you're 100% perfect all the time, super motivated, you're grinding, you're hustling, you're working, and they don't relate to that. That's not how they're going to envision themselves working with you. So when they go and work with somebody else, it's not because they like that person more, it's just because they related with them, right? It's because that authenticity aspect of it is what we talked about when it comes back to reality TV. The reason why reality TV is so captivating is because we either believe that it's completely false and things actually work this way, or we say, what, man, I wonder what it would be like to have that much money. I wonder what it would be like to do this, right? We're doing one of two things. If we fall into that middle area, that would be the worst thing for reality TV, because we wouldn't actually be a part of the story. We wouldn't continue the story. And I think that's where a lot of people fall into, is that middle area, right? They come out with the most perfect post in their eyes, the most edited, super high graphic. I spent X amount of dollars on this post. And then they come back to us and say, we didn't get any business from it. Well, why? Because you did one post, and that one post did not actually cover these four different aspects. So did I answer the question on the four fundamentals? I know you can get me to talk for a while.
So you've got four pillars in terms of marketing, right? Personal, community, brand, and business. You've got four components of telling that individual, or those stories: relevance, structure, simplicity, and authenticity. Which of those four components do you think people struggle with the most? Or do you think it just varies based on person or time? Or is there one that's more difficult than others for people, do you think?
Authenticity. Huge.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Say that one more time.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think authenticity?
I think that's a lot of people are trying to be somebody that they're not, unfortunately, because they think if somebody sees them in this other light, they'll work with me, right? But the whole issue with social is that any person that is out there that looks perfect, unfortunately, they're not. And what we need to realize is that we need to be authentic in order to attract business our way, as opposed to chasing leads down. Because when you're authentic, we use the line, and this is something you can say, Jonathan said that, if you have to Google what to say, you should not say it. Why?
That's a good one.
You would not say that normally. That's not what you think. That's not what you believe. And if you're putting out a message that you don't think that way, you don't believe that, you didn't come up with that, Well, how do you expect somebody else to gravitate towards you? You're speaking like somebody else. So authenticity, I think, is huge, and that's showing your good times, that's showing your bad times. I personally believe that social media should not be your diary. So I don't think that you have to do and show the world everything. However, if you're only showing one aspect, if you're the perfect agent, you work 24/7, you work 365 days a year, there's nobody that's going to outbeat you. Well, the moment that person calls you at 11 p.m. at night and you don't answer their phone and they go somewhere else, you should not be upset at all, because the message that you put out on social is, I work 365, 24/7, grind,
That's right.
hustle,
I'm just grinding. Yeah, that's right.
And so don't be upset when they go elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, that's easy.
So where does one start, right? So like, you're lost in this loop of fact-based marketing and social media presence. Like, if I want to shift my perspective and I want to start telling a different story, or a story in general, what's a great step forward?
I think the best step, and we utilize it as well, is asking people what they want, asking people what they want to see. So then that way we understand the reason why they're not engaging or they're not watching our videos. I think it's very easy to do, is to come out onto social and say, hey, look, I've been doing some training and we really want to incorporate more storytelling into our posts, because we want to help you do X, Y, Z, whether that's moving, whether that's selling, whatever niche that you're in, that's what you want to help them. I just have a question for everybody. Based off of our previous post, what is it about it that you liked? What didn't you like? Is there a reason why you watch some videos over the other? Like, actually ask people.
So talk to people.
Yeah.
Get their feedback. We do it all the time.
Right.
And it could be very basic. Like we put out a list of a few things people can say just to generate engagement. It can be very basic of, what's the color of your front door and why is it that color? Oh, next thing you know, people are posting their door this color. They're telling you what they believe. Why was it so easy to get that much engagement? Because people are actually in that story. They actually have a color door that they can say, mine is this, mine is that, right? So asking questions is probably the easiest way to start kind of this storytelling process. And again, when it comes back to structure, a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. If they come in with, my front door is red because we love the color red, your next immediate response to that should not be, so do you want to buy a house? and we see it all the time, right? So I think to answer your question, Ryan, it just goes back to again, telling people what you're doing. We do things in marketing that some people think are like crazy advanced, right? Retargeting, advanced analytics, pixels, right? But the best thing that we do with our ads that we run is we tell people what we're doing, right? So if we send them to a landing page, they don't register on the landing page, then they come back, we tell them, hey, you were just on our landing page and you didn't input information. I wanted to send you this video. Why are we doing that? Because if we just put an ad in front of them based off of the fact that we're retargeting them, they think this person's stealing my information, the government's after me, they're hacking me. When we tell them actually what's going on, oh, wow, man. So he went onto my website, or I went onto his website. He was able to do this. Man, imagine if they can do that for our house, right? They're literally in this storytelling process. So just telling people what you're doing is a very good piece of advice because people don't like to be tricked and they like to be right. So, when you tell them that's what you did, I knew that's what they were going to do to me. I knew it. I knew it.
The whole time. So that's great. I think that's, just engaging with people, asking questions, and that ties in with 1, 3, and 4, right? Relevance, simplicity, authenticity. That's seems to me, when you ask what's the hardest piece, those seem like the easiest things. Right. And I think for a lot of agents that might be true, but I think where a lot of agents and salespeople in general probably struggle is number 2, which is structure. Okay, I'm out there, I'm posting things, I'm talking to people, and this guy's got a red door and a yellow door. It's crazy. But like now, what do I do about structure, right? Like how do I turn this into an actual strategy that doesn't just have me running off into the woods all day?
I think we can relate structure back to something that we hear a lot, which is brand recognition or awareness. Structure is not just a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's clearly grounding you in a specific brand. If your market is a luxury market, the structure of your post, the structure of your marketing should look the same. That way somebody will say—
consistency with it.
Correct. We see this person everywhere. Even if they're not, why do they see them everywhere? Because they're actually in the subconscious, and the subconscious sees them everywhere. So having that consistent branding or that niche, right? A lot of people say the niches get you rich. It's very key, because if you're luxury agent one day, your first time home buyer the next day, you're military veteran, the number one best in the state, you're the top this, you're philanthropist, you're all over the place. Who are you, right?
What about like props and stuff? Like I was at a conference, I don't remember which one, but the lady was talking about, and she's big into video and social media and storytelling, but she always has a Diet Coke. I have a key lime LaCroix, right? People think of her all the time. It's like, now if I do this every webinar, I'm like, oh yeah, Ryan drinks LaCroix. Right?
He's the lime LaCroix guy. Yeah,
I'm the lime LaCroix guy now. Jonathan, this is the first time I've ever seen you without a hat on, right? So, nice hair. But what do you think about stuff like that? Just like little things to like weave in and like make that part of your narrative.
Yeah, I mean, if you saw under my desk, you would actually see that I'm in shorts. And
me too.
It goes back to that kind of stuff. Like, that's who I am. People understand that he wears a hat, and I'm going to show people I wear a hat. Why? Because when I show up, I want them to see me for who I am. And if they already relate to me, they already understand this is the structure, this is what Jonathan offers, then it's a much easier sell to get them to do something, because they already know who I am. If I were to go into an appointment the next day in a suit and tie, like good to go, right?
Freak everybody out, right?
What? Wait.
Yeah.
What? And so they're doing that, like, wait, what? The brain is saying, wall up, something's wrong here.
Mm-hmm. They might not even know what it is.
What are they trying to sell us?
Right.
What are they trying to do? Something's wrong. But when we're very consistent, like you said, then we feel like we already know this person. We know his family. We know what he does.
Sorry, I was right. One more question about structure. So we're doing these things. We're starting to weave some consistency through our messaging. Do you leverage any tools or recommend any tools just to buffer or any of these like social media posts, like to make sure that like something is consistently happening in a queue? Or how do you? I guess the question is, how do you recommend the deployment of this content?
Well, I firmly believe that you should not use a tool until you understand these different things, because a tool is actually going to hurt you if you're posting a lot, but then you can't go back and respond to people. That's going to hurt you from seeing more things. So I always tell people, have a consistent posting schedule first, right? Don't go out there and say, I want to post 3 times a day, this time, because the moment that you don't, you've now essentially lied to people when you said we're going to do this all these different times. The brain actually says, let's put up a wall. But most importantly, the algorithms are actually based off of those different things. So if my podcast comes out every Tuesday at 9 a.m., the reason that my podcast instantly goes above any other post at that time is because I've done it for so long that the algorithm actually builds what's called the trust or relevance score. So they understand, hey, that's Jonathan's podcast. Everybody loves it. Let's show it, right? So stick to something that you can do first before you start adding these different tools to help you automate because the moment that you automate everything, you schedule everything, is the moment you leave that, you lose that authenticity, right? You're no longer simple. The structure is now based off of somebody else doing things.
Now you're a robot.
Exactly. And I think that, and don't get me wrong, we use a lot of tools, we use a lot of tech, and in the military, there's a lot of crazy tools that we can use as well. But before you go into there, again, and it's fine. If you can only post once a week, great, post once a week. But take these things into consideration, because I firmly believe 2 to 3 years ago, it was about more content, people will see me, right? Post a video, post a story, post this, post. People are just fed up with it, right? We were talking the other day with a client. It's like, man, a couple of years ago, you would love to see like a family like on Facebook. You're like, oh, that's a cute family. I remember blah, blah, blah. Now they're like, stay off Facebook. But if they got a card, they got that handwritten card again, they're like, oh, mail. Like I got mail, right? So again, it's just going back to those 2 to 3 years were all about like post. Now people are just fed up with it because everybody's doing it. They're like, who's authentic? Who can I relate to? Who's going to tell it like it is, good or bad, right? And those are the people that will attract to you. Those are the people that will become, that relationship as opposed to just a lead.
Got it. So Ryan and I have, we could probably talk with Jonathan at length and ask 1,000 questions because we really enjoy this topic of storytelling and telling a good story. Now that said, this is a live webinar. So if you are watching us now, we would love, if you're watching us in Zoom, go ahead and just type in your question in the chat box or the Q&A box. We can see those things. And if you're watching us at our public Facebook page, facebook.com/Sierra Interactive, head there and you can throw us a like while you're there. We'd really appreciate it. You can also type your comments there. I'm monitoring that, so we'll do our best to answer any questions that you have for Jonathan. One comment, not so much a question, but a contribution that Sandy gave to us in terms of consistency said, it's like the ancient glamour shots from Agent 20 years ago, beauty queen online, then a senior citizen shows up at your door. So
don't do it.
I guess the point there being that you may think that the image that you're going to show online is what you really want people to believe, but when you actually have to show up in real life, if it doesn't match, that does throw up these red flags in people's minds, is what you're saying, Jonathan.
Definitely. And it's the glamour shot. It's the way that you write. It's the way that you talk, right? If I'm talking a certain way here on this webinar, and then after the webinar, I go back and I'm perfectly precise with my grammar and perfectly this and very eloquent and hey, that's somebody different, right? But if I continue the same thing, the way that I look, the way that I talk, the way that I write, I just build up this trust score with somebody. And that's what your goal with social is. Your goal is not to convert somebody or get somebody to swipe their credit card to buy a house. That's just not going to happen overnight, right? Unfortunately, if that were the case, all of us would have card readers on us at all time.
That's a hell of a credit card.
Your goal really is just, what's that?
I said that's a hell of a credit card.
Your goal is really just to get somebody to fit themselves into your story, to show yourself at Disneyland with your family and show yourself at Disneyland with your family, right? Don't show yourself at Disneyland, with this perfect castle, this perfect editing, this perfect everything. Like it took you 3 weeks to do the post, even though you were at Disneyland 3 weeks ago. Like, hey, we're at Disneyland right now. Like, that's the picture that you should put out there, because guess what somebody's going to do? Remember that time we were at Disneyland? Remember we stood right there? Remember when we did this? Oh man, I remember, oh man, the weather that day was so hot and the ice cream was melting all over, right? The moment that they do that, they don't even realize that they have this bond with you. So when you go and post something else in the future that falls into any of the categories, they see it in a different light, right? So if I go out and I post something about real estate and I continue this kind of storytelling process, the brain is already wired at that point. How do I fit into that story? How do I fit into this? Oh man, I remember, oh man, look at Jonathan now. Like, he just sold this house. Man, that's so good of him. I remember this a couple of weeks ago. He was at Disneyland and he had ice cream falling all over him. Like, that's how simple it is, but you have to do that, right? So it's very easy to talk about storytelling, but if you're not going to do it, it's not going to help you. And so
it doesn't have to be Disneyland, right? You don't have to wait for that big moment. It could be you like huevos rancheros at the local, breakfast spot. And you take a picture and tell people why you love it, or do a quick video, and people are going to relate to that because
think
you're
about
in the
it
community.
This way. I think it's kind of hilarious. I was telling my wife this the other day, is that when Instagram first rolled out, everybody was taking pictures of their food.
All food pics.
Right? It was all food.
Love a good food pic.
Food. Now there's not that many food pics, but when you see a food pic, you're like, man, that looks good, right? You're not like that. You're not like, oh, that's annoying. Everybody's doing food, right? Why? Because now you're getting back to that authenticity, that simple just food. You're like, man, that looks good. Oh man, I'm actually getting kind of hungry. Whew, man, do you get what I mean?
I also like food.
Exactly.
Now, how do you suggest, like, so with a social feed, the life cycle of this content's kind of short, right? Because it's just the nature of social media feeds. Do you have any recommendations on like what goes on social versus what goes on like your website blog, right? Or like, should it be everything, or how do you coach to that?
So for us personally, on our website is more how to. It's more step by step. It's more detailed. It's intended for somebody that has more time to go through something. Social is short, and a story is there for a day. But if somebody doesn't see it, very fast, they're not going to see it at all. That's why the storytelling aspect is huge, because if you can tell stories and start engaging with people in one sense, when you're doing more posts in the future, you're continuing the story. You're not going to put, let's just go back and use the Disneyland example. Let's say that I got somebody to say, oh, I remember my family at Disneyland with the ice cream. When I go out and I start talking about myself at the park now, right? Community, I start talking myself at the park. Let's say that person comments. Again, I'm going to say, man, and just 2 weeks ago, I was at Disneyland in the ice cream. I wonder what's going to happen today, right? I'm just continuing that story with that person in different posts. I'm not going to jump to, do you want to buy or sell a house now? Even if I'm talking something business related, if they're just engaging from, okay, he was just at Disneyland eating ice cream, to let's comment, oh, I hope everything goes well on my business related posts. It's not, do you want to buy a house now? It's just continuing that story with them through your different posts. And that's why we want to put out those 4 types of posts: personal, community, brand, and real estate, because your goal is just to get that first engagement with them anywhere. Because the moment that somebody gives you, especially if they give you their information or they engage with you, they're 10 times more likely to become a client in the long term if you just continue the story. How do they see themselves as a part of this? If I put out something that says we're working with military home buyers, right? Let that person that was looking at the Disneyland go, hey, did you know that Jonathan was actually in the military? I had no clue. And yeah, he actually has this program that does X, Y, Z. Again, allow them to fit themselves in.
Okay, so I want to ask you, Ryan earlier asked you about where somebody gets started, just in terms of tools. So let's say that I come to you and I'm like, Jonathan, I have a Twitter account, I've got a Facebook account, I've got an Instagram account. I heard I should probably be putting videos on YouTube. The kids these days, they're all on Snapchat, or at least they were. Do I start doing TikTok videos or whatever? Like, where do you kind of guide someone who's like, just point me in the right direction, what I should be doing in terms of social media and telling my story?
I think it goes back to first figuring out what their goal is of social, because a lot of chatter is out there. You should be on 50 different platforms and be an expert and do this, but that's not that doesn't work for most people. It doesn't even work for myself. So I would say go back to what your goal is. If your goal is purely to generate business, then that's fine. If your goal is purely for brand awareness, great. But knowing what your goals are going to give you this kind of strategy, so that way you can outline your social to say, this is what my goals are, right? If you want to get 1 million followers, great. You can get 1 million followers if you have a strategy in place. So I think it goes back to figuring out what you want out of social, and also figuring out what you don't want. If you don't want to follow people that are going to, bring negativity into your life or do this, like, right, why are you following those people? So knowing what you want and knowing what you don't want out of the platforms is great. And once you understand that, I say, do what you like, right? Because if you don't like what you're doing, you're not going to do it well anyways. Right. So who cares if somebody is an expert in YouTube and you're not? Right. And you have great engagement and you've built lots of relationships on Facebook, stay on Facebook, right? I'm not going to tell you to go and do all of these crazy things if you don't want to do it. The only caveat to that is, and we've tested this, is based off of the algorithms and based off of the ad algorithms, there's a very huge kind of breakthrough that we found, that if you can optimize 5 profiles, right? Optimize means just fill them out correctly. You can optimize 5 profiles, you'll actually see higher engagement, impressions, awareness, reach on all of them. Because let's say I have a Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. If I had them optimized, for us, optimized means my name, email, phone number, website URL, and address are the exact same. What actually happens is the algorithms will basically be in competition, meaning if Facebook knows that Jonathan Hawkins on Facebook is the exact same person on LinkedIn, let's show Jonathan stuff more on Facebook so he gets his audience to stay here. If I'm on Twitter and I'm doing well on Twitter, then Instagram is going to say, let's show his stuff more here. So then that way Jonathan comes back, so that you actually get these platforms in competition, because they understand Jonathan is everywhere. We want to keep them on our platform. So you don't have to, like, we're not an expert on a lot of things. We're not an expert, but we don't utilize all of the platforms as much as every day somebody is telling us, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? We only have so much time in the day, right? We all have the same amount of time. It would be great to do all of these things, but my audience, they know who I'm for. Therefore, everybody else knows I'm not for them, and that's what works. And so your goal is, John Cheplack, Coach John Cheplack says, if you're for everyone, you're for no one. And it goes, and he dives it into it even more. And he talks about it on a podcast that we did, and I'd encourage somebody to listen to it. That's, if you're trying to be all things to all people, you're going to bring nothing to no one. And that's when you get lost in that middle ground. That's when you get lost in all of the noise. And everybody has busy lives. Everybody is running around doing all these things. Go back into that storytelling process. Go back into guiding somebody to do what you want them to do. In the military, the best interrogators in the military can get somebody to believe they've done something, even if they haven't done so. The reason that they're able to do that, unfortunately, is because they're great storytellers. They understand that the brain is wired for storytelling. If I want somebody to do something, I just have to tell them a story that they believe, and they're going to take action. A good piece of advice, and tell me to shut up and go to another question if you want. When it goes into storytelling and showing different things, we teach agents, when they're developing this intro video and showing them who they are, start using some of these aspects. Meaning, if I'm going to eventually ask somebody to sign a listing agreement, well, guess what I want to do? In my video that I'm playing during my presentation, I'm actually showing them somebody else that took the pin from me and signed. Why? Because when I give you the pin, I want the brain to say, that's what you're supposed to do next, right? That's storytelling at a very high level, but it's very, very, very basic, right? It's getting somebody to see and fit themselves into it. Because if I tell this long story, when I was a broker, my presentation was a 4-minute video. It was always this 4-minute video that started from start to end and showed them the experience they're going to have that somebody else had. And guess what? They're going to fit themselves in. Oh yeah, we're at this phase right now. Oh, we're at that phase right now. So when I want them to go to the next phase, they already see what the results are. They already know what's going to happen. And they move forward.
I appreciate what you said about, in terms of social, where to start. And you said start where you like do what you like, because I think that speaks to the whole point of authenticity. If I'm now like the buttoned up guy on LinkedIn, and I'm certainly not that way in real life, then that looks like something and I forcing myself to go onto LinkedIn, and I just don't appreciate having to do this. And I'm writing posts that are completely different than what I would tweet about or post about on Instagram with images. Then yeah, it's going to speak to something that's off in terms of my authenticity. I also appreciate your insight that filling out social media accounts is essentially filling out the forms. Optimizing them is essentially filling them out correctly.
What I forgot to mention there is the testing proved that when you do that, you'll get a 4 times organic engagement across your platforms just because they were optimized. So when you come to me and you say, we want to help me with ads, help me get more business, and we go back and we see that things are not even filled out, the platforms also see that and they say, well, you can run ads with us, but since you're not willing to optimize your platforms here, you're going to have to spend more.
So in terms of people who are coming away from this webinar, which has a lot to chew on and think about, what are some resources that you would point people to? They're like, hey, I want to know more about how I can implement some of these principles into my own business and my own life. What would you point them to?
And it's quite funny that one of the things you said is they have a lot to think about. And we covered a lot. The reason that they have a lot to think about, this goes back into storytelling, is because you sitting there in that chair listening to me, you're thinking, man, I wonder if we could do this. I wonder if we did this on our profiles, would this work? Ryan's thinking, man, I was thinking, when it comes to authenticity, if we do, like, that's me just telling it like it is, showing you and then you guys sitting there and saying, man, imagine if we did this and we did that. That's me getting you to do what I'm telling you guys to do. So as far as resources are concerned, I can send you guys, if you guys don't already have it, we can send you guys information on the fundamentals. Feel free to share it with your audience, however way you see fit. We have video training on it, and we have a downloadable guide on that. Outside of that, we do have our own academy. This is tools and training specific for social media and marketing for the real estate industry. That's the #agent.com. And you can find information there, or you can go onto Sierra's website, and under their partner section, you can click on that link there, and that'll get you the information. But what I want you to realize, for anybody listening, when you reach out to me on social, also at Jonathan Hawkins Official .com, but at Jonathan Hawkins Official or JonathanHawkinsOfficial.com, my website. I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm also going to encourage you to do some things. And it's going to come in a different way, because that's the way that I learn things. If you're going to take anything away from this, what I want you to realize is that just because it's done a certain way for X amount of time does not mean that that's the way that you should be doing it.
Right.
Agree with me or not? I believe that marketing should be done the way that a marketer thinks, not the way that a real estate agent thinks. So when you come and say, we want ads to be run, I say, why do you want ads to be run? You say, we want to generate more leads. I would tell you that's the third step in a marketing cycle. Let's go back and let's go through this marketing funnel together. So if you dive into any of our content on social, you might go, wow, I've never heard this before. I've never heard anybody talk about this or do that. And that's a good thing. So at Jonathan Hawkins Official, my website, and then the #agent as well.
Great. And so the last thing I want to ask you, Jonathan, and then I'm going to ask you the one thing that or at least, what did I miss, is if anybody watching this, if you wanted them to come away with one thing only, everything else is gone, but one thing, what would it be?
Your goal on social media is not anything other than to be happy. Because if you're happy, that's going to resonate. If you're doing things and showing people what makes you happy, that is going to lead to what we say a business and life that you love. Even if you listen to this and you say, all of that sounds way too advanced, that's because you're making it way too advanced. Do the things that you like. and you're going to attract that type of person working with you and working towards that business and life that you love. I think that it's very imperative in all of these talks. Our mission is very clear. That's to help entrepreneurs launch and scale a business and life that they love. Don't forget or don't get caught up in all the noise. If you're putting your life and your personal health and your family aside, make sure that you're creating that business and life that you love. Social media is not going to be your best friend on some days, and that's okay. But don't put your personal side and your personal life to the side just to be this perfect person online, because we've seen it happen, unfortunately, to a lot of people. And that's actually the reason why we started the hashtag agent, was to help people realize that your business is great, but if your life is not, all of this means nothing. So I'd like you to take that away, even though it's not even anything about the topic. And the reason I say that is because if you're listening to this and you're like, screw that guy, hate everything that he says, great. I just want you to realize that I'm trying to help people create a business and life that they love. You should do the same thing. And if you're doing things that you don't like, just stop.
Awesome.
Yeah, putting out that social content that doesn't jive with what's going on in your real life, social media content that is intended to make things look happy when you're not happy, that runs out real quick. That's absolutely the case. All right, and what's something that we didn't talk about that you are just burning to throw in?
Oh, yeah. Do we have 24 hours or 24 seconds? No, I'm kidding. Let's see. I would probably say that I'm burning to throw in, and there's lots of things that I can talk about. But I think that it really just goes back into what something that Ryan said is going through the tools and going through how do we do this better or do that better or whatnot. Try to just get that clear schedule, and the schedule is not perfect. Some people like to talk about the perfect morning, but I personally believe there's no such thing as a perfect morning. And I think that most people should set themselves up thinking that way as well, because the moment that you set yourself up to have a perfect morning and you don't have a perfect morning, you also don't have a perfect day, you don't have a perfect week. So you just you tell yourself the wrong story. Your brain will actually believe that you're having a terrible day because you said, I'm having a perfect morning, and then you don't have the perfect morning because of your alarm or your kids or the food or the traffic or life just gets in the way. Set yourself up for success by realizing that you don't have to be perfect because nobody else is, and you'll resonate with a lot more people.
Yeah, having the perfect morning does not necessarily lay an exact foundation. It will happen that you'll have the perfect day. But on the flip side,
huevos rancheros.
Yeah, on the flip side, having the imperfect morning doesn't mean that your day's not going to be great. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Jonathan Hawkins, thank you so much for being with us today. And
thank you.
Ryan White, thanks as always.
I'm Robert
Sagers. Yeah, and we'll see you at the next time with these webinars. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you to all of you who joined us today, either live or watching this later. If you'd like to know more about what Ryan and I do at Sierra Interactive, simply head to sierrainteractive.com, and we'll see you then next time. Have a good day.
Bye.